morning, everybody. Like Lorian said, I am Aatish Ramkaran. I'm a digital architect at Nedbank. That's bank with a capital B, according to Tanya. But I'm not here representing the bank. I'm not here representing my awesome technology startup. I wish. I'm here just talking about a topic that really interests me. I've always been somebody that's very interested and very passionate about science and technology, a very weird path through academics, but let's leave that for now. When I started looking at blockchain, when I really started paying attention, I was reading this and then thinking, oh my God, this is incredible. It's absolutely amazing what's happening. And being surrounded by so many people that are passionate about the same topic, about its transformative potential, about how it can disrupt existing paradigms and actually improve the world. And I'm thinking about Farzam's talk earlier on. It's very exhilarating. I'm loving it. So, as a technologist, I have a love-hate relationship with jargon. Okay, the love part of it is that it keeps a technologist like myself employed. Consultants in the room, anyone? Cool. But at the same time, the problem with jargon is that it makes the thing that it's meant to describe quite alienating, quite intimidating. It makes people mistrust blockchain and proof of work and Merkelized abstract syntax trees and Schnorr signatures and all kinds of other wonderful stuff, which I'll try to get into. So this is my attempt, this talk is my attempt to really demystify some of these things for myself, and I'm hoping that in doing so I can demystify it for some of you guys. Okay, I'm late to the party. I mean, I'm thinking about what Helgard was saying about, South Africans seem like 10 years older than your average San Franciscan. It's probably all the beards, right? I mean, my beard bros in the house, anyone? Cool. But I am late to the party from a blockchain perspective. I find it fascinating, and I've been looking at it for a fair amount of time now, but not as long as people like Lorian or even people like Helgard, as young as he looks. So, even though what I may be talking to you about, some of you may already know, this may be some basic, some intro type stuff, and we'll get into some scaling and how they can the interesting ways basically that blockchains are trying to improve to meet this demand. And what you're going to see, if nothing else, are a series of bad visual puns. Okay, so let's move along. Getting straight into it, the transaction speed slide. Okay, as you can see, Visa is clearly in the lead at 1,700 transactions per second. Now, this is me being very conservative about Visa. Visa averages 1,700 transactions per second. They peak at around 20 to 30,000 transactions per second. But if I included that on this graph, the scale would skew the others basically into complete obscurity. You wouldn't even really see the other bars. That's how powerful and how fast centralized systems and centralized payment networks like Visa are. They've been doing this for a long time. That's all they do, and they are very, very good at it. Blockchains, cryptocurrencies are a relatively new addition, basically, to the world. And as you can see, they're quite slow. But that slowness, basically, is for a very good reason. If you think about a Visa transaction, you show up, I want to buy these awesome beard products. Sorry. Anyway. So I take my product, I take my credit card, I go to the guy. Cool, he puts my credit card into a POS device, and he scans my card. That goes to a server, or a bunch of servers, basically, within the Visa network. Bounces around a little bit, but mostly it goes to the bank where my account is held, a debit is made, the retailer gets his money, and we're done. That's a transaction. Easy. Everybody in there is what's called a trusted third party. You guys have seen a lot of people talk about this already. Visa trusts all the servers within the Visa network, and Visa trusts the bank trusts Visa. Everybody is just this wonderful circle of life. It's beautiful. However, here comes the blockchain. I mean, Farzam made a very good point, basically, but it's not actually removing the need for trust. But ultimately, from a financial transaction perspective, let's look at just that microcosm. To be able to trust people to actually move money around, I mean, this is a nightmare. I mean, the bus driver example, moving things to Zimbabwe, these aren't scalable mechanisms. So how do you scale for financial trust at the very least, or financial transaction trust? This is where blockchains come in, where if I had to use the contrast to the Visa transaction example, what we have is your transaction basically goes into the gigantic blockchain network. These are thousands, hundreds of thousands of computers that are working, or ASICs in this case. The transaction gets validated, that transaction gets bundled up with a bunch of other transactions into a block, that block gets mined and then chained up to every other block. Blocks are only created roughly every 10 minutes, and there are lots and lots and lots of independent validators. Everybody is effectively a trusted intermediary to some degree. So the point is that there are many more moving parts, basically, in a blockchain transaction, but it is solving for this notion of trust. I don't trust all the other computers around me, so the only way I can deal with this is to not trust anybody and have everybody check everybody else's homework. That is a lot of work, okay? And well, I'll get into proof of work later, but that's one of the fundamental reasons why they're slow. They're not slow because they're shitty. They're slow because they need to be slow in certain cases. But that doesn't change the need for transactions, okay? CryptoKitties. Helga, you stole my thunder, man. But CryptoKitties is a great example. I'm not a cat person, so somebody needs to explain this to me, okay? It's insane. But I think in December, they did like $19 million worth of cats. Okay, weird. But what's important about this is that as ridiculous and silly as it looks, this one application, this one thing, was responsible for 25% of all Ethereum transactions. It's like something using a quarter of the internet's capacity. You know, it's insane. But that's where we are with CryptoKitties. Now, CryptoKitties is one of the early pioneering applications because that had some viral success. More are coming. And CryptoKitties, again, I mean, it's a cutesy game, really. But there are real-world use cases, basically, that are hot on the heels of this. Okay, and the demand is only going to increase. So the next CryptoKitties, the next decentralized World of Warcraft, basically, is coming. So, more visual metaphors. So, if we look at this, right? I mean, this helps with the rest of my presentation. So what we have are this is a post box, really, but it's a metaphor for a blockchain. There's a box, and inside this box, basically, are a whole bunch of pieces of paper, and these pieces of paper represent transactions. And as you can see, that box or block is almost full. So, if more transactions are coming, we can only fit that much of paper inside a box, and new boxes are only being created every 10 minutes or so. How do we deal with this? Okay, so scaling. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your pity. Thank you. My wife just looked at this sideways, but anyway, let's move on. So I'm owning it. The easiest thing to do basically is think, okay, cool. Obviously, the thing we need to do is bigger boxes, right? We're going to do that. So we're going to increase block size. So here we are, nice orderly collection basically of containers that are holding pieces of paper representing transactions. All is good and well, but more pieces of paper are coming. We can't create ledgers fast enough. How do we deal with this? Bigger boxes, okay? And we get to this point. And okay, cool. So we got some forklifts, we're moving these boxes around, everything's great. I can sense Lorian basically looking at me here. He knows where I'm going with this. And then we get to this, okay? Sooner or later, we're going to get to a point where it becomes ridiculous. And I mean, this is not meant to be funny. One of the reasons why we actually have small blocks in Bitcoin is to actually prevent spam or denial of service attacks. The larger the block, the more crap you can stuff in there, and the more work's required basically to actually tell what is valid from what is not valid. And in doing so, basically, you're wasting the entire network's time and slowing things down even further. Now, it is an intuitive solution to the scaling problem. I have a box, I need to put more stuff into it, basically, I'll make the box larger. There's nothing wrong with that approach. However, every time this happens in a blockchain, and specifically, and Laurie mentioned this as well, last year what we saw was the fork, where Bitcoin split into Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash went for 8 meg blocks, Bitcoin remained on the 1 meg block size. And again, besides the political and the holy war that went along with it, the point is that we now had a parallel sort of chain basically running along what was the original chain. Now, if we had to keep doing this, we'd have more and more of these forks. So ultimately, this is actually fragmenting the entire market. What about something else? Okay, now you guys would have heard of SegWit, or segregated witness. It's another one of these terms, these cryptic terms. Cryptocurrency, anyone? Okay. The point is, SegWit is an alternative approach, okay? The next obvious question to ask, if we can't make the boxes bigger, what about if we could make the pieces of paper smaller? Okay, that sounds awesome. Great. In a way, it's also kind of like making the box bigger, but not really. So, the technical part of the slide. I don't expect you guys to read this, but really, this is really the structure of a block. the blocks in blockchain, this is one of them. Not to scale, but this red piece actually represents the transactions, which make up about 99% of every block. One of the slide looks weird. That's not meant to happen. The witness part was supposed to be small and to the side, but really, inside a transaction, or inside the transaction portion of a block, there are these things called signatures. And signatures ultimately are used to prove that the input bitcoins that are from me to you, if I'm paying you, that I actually own those inputs to pay you, those little bits of transactions. It's like loose change, basically, in a little bucket. Anyway, but the point is that signature data actually makes up about 65% basically of all transactions. So if it's not really part of the transaction, it's just used to make sure that the transaction itself is valid. The person spending the money actually owns it. So one of the things they did was to segregate the witness data. Sorry, that slide looks weird. Imagine that next to the yellow arrow right here. Okay. So the signature data was moved out of the transaction, the repeating transaction input block, moved down to a separate portion, hence segregated witness. And ultimately, and the interesting trick here was that they didn't change the size of the block. They, instead of calling it 1 megabytes or 1,000 bytes or 1,000,000 bytes, they called it 1,000,000 units. Okay, that means that the way they counted witness data, or the signature data, is at 25% the size of an actual byte of data. So in effect, they sort of quadruple the size of the block. Okay, it's still a 1 megabyte physical data structure. But in the signature data, when it's being validated, when we are transacting upon it in the blockchain network, signature data is now treated as 25% of full size. And in so doing, they are allowed to still use a 1 megabyte block, but achieve about 4 times, the math differs here, but say 3 to 4 times the amount of transaction capacity inside. Okay, so SegWit it's a smart solution because it also allows for backwards compatibility. So for previous nodes and miners that were using the 1 megabyte block, that has not changed. They can still use this, except that they won't know exactly what's going on, but it doesn't break the network, it doesn't require a fork. SegWit went live, everyone's okay, But ultimately, what I want to get to, both of these are on-chain scaling techniques, okay? And this is the best piece of art I could find. To me, as a technologist that's grappled with like distributed systems problems and integration between financial services and dealing with high throughput, I worked for the JSE for 7 years on trading systems. This is a kicking the can down the road scaling approach. Sooner or later, you're just staving off the inevitable. At some point, you're going to get to more transactions. We need a larger block, or we need to compress the blocks more with more SegWit, more Schnorr signatures. It's a thing, look it up. But the point is, sooner or later, basically, you're going to have to keep reacting to what's happening here. So to me, both of these are fine solutions, except that they're not the final solution. Doesn't sound good. But you know what I mean, okay? It's not sustainable. And now is where we get to the interesting stuff, on-chain, off-chain scaling. And you may have heard of something called the Lightning Network. So I tried to find awesome-looking images that could encapsulate the visual metaphor of the Lightning Network, and I failed you. As a speaker, I have failed in doing this. So I had to go and draw my own diagram. Apologies, this is what I do for a living. I architect solutions. Diagrams represent that, but let's leave it. So what we have here is a bunch of blocks that have a little chain in between them. Get it? Okay. And each one of these little blocks inside here basically represent a transaction. Now, in the previous diagram, I showed you, that box was full of paper, or that red bit was full of signature data and input transactions. These blocks basically get full, and it costs money, and it takes time basically to actually create transactions that are confirmed inside a block. So the way off-chain scaling technologies like the Lightning Network work is it creates what's called a payment channel between, in this case, this is a bidirectional payment channel. It's really just two people that want to transact with each other. So best example, I am obsessed with coffee. I've probably had too much today, mostly because I found that awesome coffee machine at the back because it's actually made of real beans, okay? So I buy a lot of coffee. So if I go to Vida almost every day. So instead of me actually creating if I was paying them in Bitcoin, instead of me creating a Bitcoin transaction on the blockchain every time I wanted to pay for a coffee at Vida, this is the micropayment issue. It would cost more in fees than the actual price of the coffee of the transaction. It's perverse. So in this case, I'd say, listen, I go to Vida every day. I want to set up a tab at Vida. So I'll create what's called a payment channel with me on the one side and Vida on the other side. Okay. And what that means is I'll put in some Bitcoin or some of my currency basically into this payment channel. and then me and Vida will transact off the chain over there, bouncing transactions amongst each other. Now, in this case, basically, and my lust for coffee, it'll just be a ton of arrows going that way. But assume this is bidirectional, right? And I bought a coffee, and then they sponsored me a muffin or something. Maybe I'm plugging Vida here. But we could transact amongst each other using the Bitcoin that's locked into that payment channel as many times as you want, instantly, for no fees. Because remember, the transaction is going directly to the other person. This is true peer-to-peer. It's not going into the blockchain where we need to actually talk to all the nodes, get everybody to validate everyone's signals, we're cool, mine it into a block, chain it up, and we're ready to rock. This is just two people basically bouncing cash between each other as fast as they want to, as many times as they want to. What's really interesting about this is what's called the routing mechanism through Lightning. So it's not that, I mean, if we go back here, if I had to take this metaphor as it is basically and then use it basically as an alternative to blockchain, I had to say, that, okay, cool. Everybody I want to pay, I need to open up a payment channel with them. And sorry, the way you open up a payment channel is that the two parties record the amount of Bitcoin they're putting into that channel into an opening transaction in a blockchain on the block. And when they want to close their payment channel, they issue the closing transaction. So ultimately, you can have two people transacting like 100,000 times between each other if you buy that much coffee. And all it would cost you is really 2 transactions on the blockchain instead of 100,000. It's great from a scaling perspective because, one, it doesn't introduce that 100,000 transactions basically into the blockchain. It's really, really fast because, I mean, I'm paying you directly. And there's no fees between us because we don't require the rest of the blockchain network to validate this. So it is an awesome solution to this problem. And I think this is the one, I personally am very bullish about this. I think this is the sustainable solution to slowness of blockchain. Cool. Into the routing. So instead of me having to create a payment channel with everybody I want, because what's the use in that? It means I need to have an opening and a closing transaction for every person I ever want to pay. That's kind of defeating the point. So the way Lightning works, which is really awesome, is that it allows you to connect your transaction and route it through the Lightning network. So if that was me in yellow, should have been blue, and if this is the person I want to pay, this is Vida. They should be in red. Sorry, Vida. Through the connectedness of a network, the fact that multiple people would open up payment channels, I could actually route my transaction through intermediate nodes in this. This is pretty much how the internet works. Imagine these 3 circles basically as routers on the internet. Okay, I can move my packet from router to router to get to its final destination, except in this case, I'm not moving a packet, I'm moving cryptocurrency. Okay? What's interesting about this is that, okay, cool, we have intermediaries now. They can steal my money. Actually, no, they can't. One of the really awesome things of the Lightning Network is that you use what's called a technique called a hashed time lock contract. Okay, I know, jargon keeps me employed. But a hashed time lock contract says that between 2 parties, once we lock in our currency basically into a payment channel, a hash time lock contract is now in effect. If I close the channel, the other person, the person that my counterparty gets his money immediately. The final state of our Lightning transactions are netted and he gets his money immediately. But I have to wait for about 1,000 more blocks to be created before mine can come out. Now, the beauty of the time lock contract is that between every transaction that we are doing on the Lightning Network or in that payment channel, we are exchanging the keys for the previous transaction. It gets a bit technical, but really the point is that if I try and just really defraud my counterparty by saying, actually, no, even though, I spent like 1,000 Bitcoin with Vida, that's a lot of coffee, I'm not going to broadcast my final transaction as the closing transaction back to the blockchain. I'm going to broadcast like my early one. So like I only spent like half a Bitcoin or something. The point is because I'm closing the transaction, Vida has the opportunity to get their money and then claim everything that was locked in that contract and ultimately penalize me for being a bad actor. Okay, because I have to wait for 1,000 blocks before I can actually take that money and try and defraud Vida. So there's a lot of very interesting like game theoretical elements basically that actually secure this. One of the things about routing specifically is that as I'm moving my money here, for node 1 to ultimately get the Bitcoin that I'm passing across here, he needs to prove to me that he's already moved Bitcoin to the next one. So the point is you can only get the money you're receiving after you've actually forwarded the payment to the next node in the network. So it is a very, very smart solution to the problem. Cool, Lightning. What's really awesome about this is that in terms of scale, Lightning transactions basically work at internet speed. It's me as a node actually sending money to you as a node. Today, if you think about how we use YouTube, the amount of data that actually moves between peers, we can move packets really quickly on the internet. And Lightning, the technology that enables this, allows you to effectively operate at those kinds of speeds. So we're talking anything in the order of hundreds of thousands to maybe even millions of transactions per second. What's really interesting as well is that I'm thinking about Trisha Martinez's talk yesterday, and she was talking about Walla and the dollar token. And she mentioned specifically zero-fee instant transactions. Now, how would you do that? Turns out, if you read their white paper, that the dollar token and their network is effectively using another technology called Raiden. Anybody played Mortal Kombat? Right, cool. Raiden is the god of lightning, or is the god of thunder, or sparkles. But the point is that Raiden is ultimately very similar to the Lightning Network, except that Raiden is Ethereum specific. It doesn't just allow you to transfer Ether, it allows you to transfer any kind of ERC20 token, which is effectively what Dala is. And that's how Dala is enabling the zero-fee instant transaction. The Lightning Network is not one company, it's actually at least 4 or 5 companies that are all developing against this protocol. They're developing the wallets and the infrastructure to actually make this happen. Lightning's already gone live. I think it was Blockstream, it was their solution that went live first. But the point is, this is what the Lightning Network looked like on the Bitcoin mainnet on the 22nd of January this year, okay? So these are the nodes, these are some of the channels between them. This is 2 months later. This is earlier this week, 5th of March. That's what it looks like now. It is growing, okay? So this is ultimately, Helga was mentioning this, layer 2 protocol. This is a layer 2 protocol that is layering over the existing Bitcoin blockchain. More fish. Let's talk about alternative scaling and IOTA and their technology called the Tangle. This is the Tangle, okay? It's, sorry, jargon, spoiler alert. This is what's called a direct acyclic graph. It's not a blockchain. It's really just, it's a data structure. A graph is a data structure, okay? Each one of these things, even though they look like blocks, are actually transactions, independent transactions. The cost of performing an IOTA Tangle transaction is that if you look at this guy here, or that guy, the cost of you adding your transaction basically into the IOTA network is that you must effectively confirm 2 previous transactions. And on and on and on it goes. So at the cost, the barrier to entry basically is the thing that sustains the network. For me to enter a transaction, I need to confirm 2 transactions. The guy behind me needs to confirm my transaction to get his transaction added on. What's really interesting about this is that this is an example of scaling where the more nodes and the more people that actually participate in this network, the scale just keeps going up. It scales basically as more people are added onto it, which is bloody fascinating. Now, the IOTA, as much as I love their technology and their concept, they can't help, like, they are mired in controversy all the time. They invented their own hash algorithm, which was proven to be weak by, I think, MIT's cryptography lab. They use trinary computing instead of binary computing because it's more efficient technically, but we don't have trinary processors yet. China's working on this. So ultimately, there's a lot of very interesting tech and a lot of very interesting innovation basically in the Tangle. But at the moment, basically, there's a lot of controversy with regards to, like being bad actors and open source and a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm trying to divorce myself from all this politics and actually just look at the technology, which is really fascinating. A technology or a blockchain-like technology that scales the more people that are working on it. The more transactions that come in, the more the network can actually handle. It's a fascinating thing. IOTA is specifically, it's the IoT thing should have given it away, but they are solving specifically for Internet of Things transactions where machines transact with each other. I'm a sensor, I want to sell some data to that crop irrigator so that it knows exactly how much of water to dispense. Or I am a autonomous car, right? Driving along a freeway in China, and while I'm driving, I want to charge my batteries using inductive charging basically on a freeway. That sounds like science fiction. China's actually built one of these freeways. So the point is that when machines begin transacting with each other, the number of transactions are orders of magnitude higher than humans transacting with each other. And that's why IOTA basically is using a few exotic technologies and a scaling technique that allows for more participants to effectively help with scaling the network. I mean, I think a few analysts have said that there are going to be something like 20 billion Internet of Things connected devices by 2020, then the future looks like even billions and trillions of devices. So this is not going away, and somebody needs to solve for these kinds of high throughput microtransactions. Alrighty. Another alternative to scale is what's called a hash graph. Okay, there's a slide I should have included here. It actually showed, like, it was literally from their white paper showing like a log with like some branches coming out of it, and they called that blockchain. And there was this weird braided tree thing that they called hash graph. It looked like a scam at first, but I started looking at the tech, and it's actually very interesting. Hash graph uses a protocol called gossip. Okay, so again, it is also in a way a direct acyclic graph. It's not strictly speaking a blockchain. It's in some respects basically similar to the Tangle in terms of its construction. But the way they work is that those nodes talk to each other constantly and pass each other events that they have come across. So if I've seen something here but you haven't, I'll tell you about it even before I know completely that this is totally valid. And then you'll see something here and you'll tell me about it and you'll tell another random friend. And the entire network effectively is gossiping constantly about events they've seen. Okay, and at some points what happens is they have what's called a virtual voting round, where at certain stages, basically during this never-ending cycle of gossip, they effectively decide on a 2/3 like supermajority and say, cool, this is the state that we all, where we achieve consensus, and we continue like that. So it's also an interesting solution to the problem. Hash graph is, I think there's a patent on the technology, so you need to have a license. It's not really open source, so, you know, hey. But the founders are saying that hash graph basically can reach speeds of up to about 250,000 transactions per second. Proof of stake. So you've heard of proof of work. This is, believe it or not, a gold mine in Brazil called the Serra Pelada mine. This did not take place at the turn of the century. This was from 1986 in modern time. This is the, my feeling, the atrocious waste of human capital and the shocking, horrific, Hieronymus Bosch-like misery of gold mining. This is what the Amazon Basin looks like. This is taken by the Carnegie Air Observatory not too long ago. The result, basically, of gold mining operations in the Amazon. It's not a pretty picture. You know, we spoke about energy usage yesterday in the panel, if you guys listened to this, and we were talking about, you know, the wasteful expenditure of energy. What about the wasteful expenditure of gold? Talk to me about the intrinsic value of gold. What do we do with it? What is gold good for? We use it in semiconductors, great, but we were mining gold way before we invented electronics, so what the hell was gold good for back then? And really, there's like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent, basically, of gold, basically, in any circuitry today. So really, we do all of this and spend this much energy on gold. Why? Because we believe it's valuable? Awesome. So is Bitcoin, everybody. And yet, this is what we're prepared to do, basically, to actually pull gold out of the ground. This is a Bitcoin mining pool. This is what the inside of a Bitcoin mine actually looks like. This is one of Bitmain's operations. Bitmain is one of the largest mining pool operators in China. This facility is actually built in Mongolia because, I don't know why, Mongolia. But the point about this is, you don't have to, like a gold mine, you have to build all the infrastructure and then just completely pillage the environment exactly where that gold is located. But Bitcoin, you can mine anywhere. So they've chosen to mine in Mongolia and in other parts of the world as well. What's interesting about this is that because you can mine Bitcoin anywhere, you want to use the cheapest electricity possible. Okay, and that today basically is renewables. So hydroelectric dams are used, like the Three Gorges Dam. This is not that picture, unfortunately, but the Three Gorges Dam, the largest hydroelectric plant in the world, built in China, is what powers most of the Chinese mining pools. This is a geothermal power station in a place called Krafla in Iceland. There are Bitcoin mines that have actually been built on top of geothermal events, basically to use the power right there. So the point is that as much as, yes, it is a wasteful expenditure of energy to effectively mine Bitcoin and confirm these transactions, the point is that it's not like gold mining. And people need to think about how much of energy and the actual human cost, basically, of gold mining for the centuries we've been doing it. And don't even get me started about diamond mining. Which brings us back to proof of stake. It's the only way to be sure. Sorry, I promise it's the last pun. So proof of stake is an alternative to proof of work, which is the mining that we all talk about. Proof of stake means that stakers or validators in a network ultimately lock some of their currency into a smart contract and say, great, I'm using this to stake the validity of these transactions that I'm confirming. If all the validators are cool with this, then everybody gets a reward proportional to the amount of money that they staked up front. If I try and confirm a invalid transaction, like, okay, my buddy here, I'm trying to double spend some crypto, and the other validators catch me out on that, I lose my stake. Okay? So the point is that there's a penalty for being a bad actor. There's an economic disincentive to effectively work against the interests of the network. Now, one of the controversies here is that, cool, if I have a pile of cash, I can just put that in and just stake forever, basically, and the rich get richer. Now, that is absolutely a criticism of proof of stake. However, there are algorithms that are being developed. I think Ethereum is building the Casper protocol that ultimately allow you, it's a selection protocol for validators. But it's not just based on just randomly selecting people within the network. It's also based on things like coin age and all kinds of other variables that try and effectively make this fair to prevent people with giant piles of ether getting larger and larger piles of ether. All right, so I'm in the home stretch here. The Cambrian explosion, okay, from an evolutionary perspective, 3 billion years ago, there was a massive diversity in life that was created. That's us over there. So we are thankful to that event. I believe that that's where we are from a Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency perspective today. You've seen some amazing technologies. You've heard like some of the weird Tangle stuff I've been talking about. There's a lot of stuff that's coming. We don't know who will win. These guys dominated the planet for 200 million years, and they were snuffed out in evolutionary timescales. We can't tell who's going to win this thing. I don't think there's going to be one winner. I think there are going to be many winners. And as much as we can't tell who's going to be the winners, freakish abominations like the platypus exist. Duck, bull, fur, webbed feet, aquatic, has a venom spur and lays eggs. Mammal, surviving and thriving in like Tasmania or New Zealand or something. The future is weird, unpredictable, quirky, and bright. Okay, I think that's where we're all going to go with this. Thank you for your time.